Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to episode 3 of the Intune for MSPs Meetup. I'm your host, Andy Rostad. We've got such a great show today with Dave Randall, Andrew Taylor, Erik Loef. So we're going to get right into it. Samuel, our producer, go ahead and bring up the slide here to let everybody know. These are all the channels you can find us, and we are around the world live and recorded. I hope you're joining us in the way that is most comfortable for you. Check out the crawl at the bottom of the screen. We're taking questions. Today we're going to try, if we've got time, like I said, it's a stat show, but if we've got time, we're going to do a little Q&A after the show. So, participate, jump into the conversation on Tech Community Live. And these calls come at you on the third Tuesday of every month at 8 a.m. Pacific. And how do we decide what we're going to talk about? Well, we take a lot of input from you, our Meetup audience. So take out your mobile device, go ahead and scan this code. You'll see this again, but we look at this survey regularly and try to curate content that's going to be really meaningful to you, because that's part of our mission. We want to understand the needs of managed service providers. We know that at Microsoft, the managed service provider hasn't always felt the love, and we're here to show you that we're listening, that we want to engage, and we want to understand and respond to the specific needs of MSPs with useful and relevant resources. Normally, this would be the time in the show when Lior would come out and tell you what's on the top of his mind. He has delegated to me the great privilege of introducing the breaking news that we've got today. Here it is, everybody. White hot breaking news. Sorry, there's no audio sting, but the big news today is we are announcing an expansion of the Intune for MSPs multi-tenant management partner ecosystem. Super exciting. If you were to go to this URL right now, you wouldn't even get to the blog yet. We are dropping this news for our Intune for MSPs Meetup crew before it even goes live. But at the end of this call, this link will get you closer to our announcement blog. We want you to go there, read about all the exciting new partners. This doesn't change the relationship of our existing partners. It's just more is better, more options for you, our Intune MSPs. And here's a preview of what we're going to cover today. Like I said, we've got Dave Randall. He's going to talk about the Intune API and graph interface. Then our world famous and much loved Hear from a Peer section has two guests today. Erik Loef's going to talk about his own MSP journey, and Andrew Taylor is going to talk about Intune Automation. And in case you're wondering why Andrew Taylor on automation, he literally wrote a book. Version 2 just out now. And then I'm going to come back at the end for a little news you can use. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Microsoft's Senior Product Manager, Dave Randall. Dave, are you out there?
Thanks so much. Yes, I am. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dave Randall, product manager in the Intune engineering team. Been at Microsoft for quite a few years, and currently I own the Microsoft Graph API, Intune role-based access control, and several of the other fundamentals that are used by you as MSPs to do automation for all of your customers. So what I wanted to do today is spend a little bit of time, talk about the options that you have, explain a little bit about our graph APIs, and kind of set the stage for what Andrew and Erik will also be talking about, that are ways that you can take advantage of those APIs. So let's get started with what are the available APIs that you can use. Well, first off, we have a couple of sets of publicly accessible APIs. There's a set of Microsoft Graph-based RESTful APIs. If you've used Microsoft Graph, it has not only Intune, but also Entra, OneDrive, Exchange, a whole host of Microsoft products that are all part of the Microsoft Graph. Intune's included in those. There's also a Graph SDK, so you can embed that SDK in your applications and access those APIs more directly. And we also have a MAM SDK. So for those of you who have built mobile applications and you want to apply application protection policies to those applications, you can incorporate the app protection policy or the MAM SDK in those applications so that when they're deployed to your customers, you have the ability to do your app protection policies and control the security and behavior of your applications in your customer environment. Now we also have publicly accessible PowerShell. There's a PowerShell Intune module. I'll be honest with you, that Intune module is pretty old and has been superseded by the Microsoft Graph module. So if you happen to run across the original Microsoft Intune module from about 2016 or 2017, just go ahead and move on to the Microsoft Graph module. We do also have a script repo on GitHub for a set of Intune PowerShell scripts that give you examples of how to use all of the different RESTful APIs that are exposed via PowerShell. And lastly, Microsoft 365 DSC, or Desired State Configuration, which has recently been re-released as Unified Tenant Configuration Management, is a tool that leverages PowerShell and allows you to do desired state, drift management, backup restore, transition of settings and policies from one tenant to another. But all of those use our publicly accessible PowerShell. And then lastly, there are a set of APIs that are available to certain integration partners. If you're an MDM partner, we have a compliance API that allows you to send compliance data to Intune so that we can leverage conditional access. There's a network access control API for access point or VPN vendors, and a mobile threat defense API. Feel free to reach out to Lior or me if you're interested in being one of the integration partners in that category. So now that we know there's a set of APIs that are available for you to use, what can you do with those APIs? Lots of different things. I gave a couple of examples here that cross both Entra and Intune. So if you need to add or manage user membership or device membership in groups, you can do that via API. There's lots of data that we collect about devices in Intune. You can view those device details. You can view a list of software that's installed on those devices, the hardware that makes up all of your devices. You can also perform a variety of different types of actions, like associate users with the device or perform device actions, such as retire, sync, or scan, trigger a scan of the device. Getting to a little bit more meaty type of capability, you can also deploy apps and policies to devices in an automated way. You can add or deploy new apps to users and devices, or you can configure device compliance policy and deploy that to all of your devices. And lastly, it's important to understand how the progress of all of those tasks that you may have created are going. And so you can also view the status of deployment, device state, application, or policy deployments. All of that is available as API calls that you can make. Now, there's a bunch of infrequent operations that typically happen, and these are also available for automating. For example, you can configure third-party connectors, such as VPN connectors. You can configure RBAC roles and role assignments, manage your filters, create and assign scope tags, more of the role and role assignment capabilities, but this would be on things like applications or policy. Oftentimes, you need to understand what happened in a tenant, so we have the ability to view all the audit logs that have been created for a tenant up to 2 years old. You can do things like add Apple VPP tokens, perform daily operational tasks, or if you're interested in more workflow, you can do things like backup entire configurations or policies, import data from a test environment, export it out to a production environment, or you can do things like a full config as code and DevOps type of activities. All of these are available because if you can do it in the Intune console, we have an API that backs that behavior. So let me explain a little bit about what that looks like from an architectural perspective. In purple, we have our IT Pro experience, which actually covers a variety of different capabilities. But typically, the Intune portal extensions go through Azure and connect directly to our Graph API. The PowerShell SDK also connects directly to the Graph API. And if you've built an application that's used for managing your customers, then that third-party application also connects to the Graph API. Graph automatically routes any of the requests to the appropriate service, whether that's Entra, other M365 services, or Intune. and also provides things like role-based access control, denial of service detection, telemetry, logging, delegated and application authentication. So Graph really lies in the middle between all of your IT Pro experiences and the backend service. So how do you understand what you can do with Graph? Well, there's a couple of different ways. First, I like going to Graph Explorer. This is a specific environment that was created by Microsoft to help you understand exactly what each Graph API call does, how it responds, what the request body, request headers, any of the permissions that were associated with that. Gives you a real nice, clean interface that also provides predictive text in the URL so that you can understand exactly what is available next for you. You can use PowerShell. For those of you that are familiar with PowerShell, you can connect to the Microsoft Graph using the PowerShell module and explore from there. If you're using a web browser and you're looking at the Intune console, I really like doing F12, viewing the network trace, and understanding exactly which API calls are being made. This is probably one of the most powerful and easiest ways to understand exactly which APIs you need to do to meet the objective that you're after. And then lastly, if you're using Power Platform, you can build Power Apps that leverage the SDK and all of the automation tools that are available. As you're building your integration, a couple of things that you want to consider. First is whether or not you're registering your application as a single tenant or multi-tenant app. If you're building for multiple customers, I suggest strongly that you build a multi-tenant application. That will help you control permissioning and versioning over time. That application will need a set of Graph permissions. Those permissions are specific to the APIs that you're calling, and each of those permissions are listed in our API reference material. Your customers are going to need to provide consent for your application. That's the admin consent piece. And they'll need to use a global administrator in order to do that consent. There's some optimizations that you can use with different APIs to retrieve data. You can use just a standard HTTP GET, you can list data, or you can use our export APIs. If your information that you need to gather is not time critical, I really suggest using the export jobs APIs. It's highly efficient and only requires one call to get all the data for a particular category. And then lastly, there are two versions of APIs, V1 and Beta. Beta is what the admin console uses. V1 uses essentially all the same quality of the APIs that exist in Beta. We just don't make a breaking change to V1 APIs without at least a 24 months notice. That's the primary difference between them. So in order to help you get started, here's a bunch of links. We'll make all of these links available for you to reference. You can see our API reference, the sample scripts, information about DSC, and one of the logs that does a great job of helping you understand what types of tools are available through Power Automate. I did a configuration as code session a while back. This is a link to that session. It's a great way to understand how you can build together automation with exporting data from your dev tenants to production tenants. And lastly, there's a blog post that explains exactly all of the same that's available. All right, with that, time to move on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. And for those of you watching who didn't grok all of that, share it with the people on your team who did. Like I said, this is recording to be made available, and it's all going to build up to what Andrew's going to present. But right now, for those of you who were a little lost, Erik's going to get right into something that I'm sure is going to affect all of you, and that is how do I run an MSP? Erik's got a great story, and without any more from me, Erik, take it away and share with us what you got.
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. My name is Erik Loef, and I'm the CTO of Proxys. Proxys is a highly standardized MSP based in the Netherlands. Today, Lior asked me to tell more about my journey running this MSP for 25 years. But first, let's get back to where it all started for me in the year 2000. in that year, we built traditional on-premise Windows 2000 domain controllers with file shares, domain joined PCs, and tape units. The infrastructure was designed for working in the office from 9 till 5. But one thing we did slightly different was that we built every customer exactly the same, with the same components on every customer side from HP, Microsoft, and Cisco. For example, if the customer already has another device, for example, a Dell server, we bought the server and bring a new HP server to the premise. So to keep everything the same. That's the way we did it the first 10 years of Proxys. Advancing in time, new customers, wishes like antivirus or spam filter, and we only deliver this as a standard managed services instead of installing on an extra server on premise that kind of software. The idea behind this was that it was easier to manage for us one spam filter for all the customers instead of 40 different on-premises spam filter implementations. So for example, if a customer already has a spam filter, we move it away and bring it to our own managed services thing. This is how it looked like in the year 2005 when we started with the spam filter things. This was our proposition for the first 10 years, but virtualization came up and we decided to embrace this new technology. We started moving the on-premises workloads to our own MSP private cloud. This was a huge transition for our business model. Instead of billing the service once by delivery, we had to invoice those servers on a monthly basis. Also, the licensing changes from open license, OEM on the CERN, all that kind of stuff, changed to the service provider license agreement model, which is very need of attention. As the number of servers grow, the more quality problems around our invoicing of service occur. We also need to hire more people with knowledge of virtualization, storage area networks, and data center architecture at larger scale. So we need more people, more technique, and we get more problems with our invoicing to our customers. To fix the invoicing issues for all those virtual servers, we hired a developer to implement a customer-made solution to get an automated inventory, and based on that inventory, we generate 100% accurate invoices based on what's happening in the tech need. The next problem we faced was that the old business model for the workspace and a new model for the service. So we had the old model for the workspaces, like delivering a laptop and an OEM office and install it. And the server was a monthly base, so one base and a monthly base. With the workspace, we also had the issue that we had many managed services options, and we're getting more and more and more a mix and match and large sales cycles because we had to explain the VPN, the spam filter, the online backup, and all kind of choices. So to fix that sales cycle problem, we introduced a workspace as a service, fixed price per month with every service on it. So we decided to build an enterprise architecture for all our customers with the vision that every customer is considered a branch office of our imaginary enterprise, which was Proxys, the MSP. So every customer was a branch office, which results in a standard workspace, fixed monthly price, including hardware. So when the hardware was owned by Proxys, we could also use the SPLA licensing on those laptops. So it was a truly monthly recurring workspace. The same we did for service, the same we did for the workspaces. And of course, we delivered all the necessary managed services because our vision was we don't want a customer without a backup. We don't want a customer without antivirus. We don't want a customer without a spam filter. So that's why we included everything, including unlimited support, because we set the rules. So we know what's happening. We implement everything. So yeah, we can predict that the amount of problems. So there are many rules, but everything was a fixed price. So here is a kind of infrastructure, high level, how we fix it. A shared private cloud with all the VMs for the specific customers, and every customer is connected to that private cloud. And everything, including the laptop, was on a price per month build. As I said, this model only works with strict governance rules. So our marketing was also, we called it all or nothing IT. So you have to outsource your complete IT to us. The customer needs to outsource all IT infra. Onboarding of a customer was always greenfield. Everything, delete everything and make it new. Make our HP, Cisco, and Microsoft bring it in. We are the IT manager and the IT admin of all those companies because we are one company. It's just a branch of our company. Everything has a monthly subscription, including laptops, which is also very known now under the name Device as a Service. The business from a business perspective, we also need to fix things because we have so much upfront investment in hardware. So we have to do some cash flow management. We have to go to the bank to get some money to buy upfront all the kind of laptops because we deliver them over time. So in year 4, you will earn the money about the DaaS construction. So there was also, from a business perspective, an impact. It was a huge learning curve for new employees due to the new rules. We have all kind of rules for the governance. For example, for a sales and account management, it can be hard. The scale, because instead of a small customer with 20 workspaces, it's connected to an enterprise with more than thousands of workspaces. So the scale and the dependency, every customer is somewhat connected to the big enterprise. That was a huge learning curve for many employees who came to work with my company. And a very important thing is no specials, stick to the plan. If you want specials, don't be a customer of us. So you have to say, we have to say more no than yes to a customer. That's a luxury problem, but for this model, it was really needed. And then Microsoft came up with the modern workplace, and around 2020, we adopted this modern workplace. Although our sales offering is still the same towards the customer, price per workspace a month, we just changed the techniques behind the scene to deliver more flexibility. Instead, flexibility not only your laptop, but also we can manage your iPhone. More productivity, you can work together in the same Word document, and more security, Defender for endpoint, Defender for identity, risk conditional access, for the same price. Because we only changed in the back the components. For example, home drive became a OneDrive, a file share became a SharePoint, a GPO was Intune. Antivirus, we replaced it by Defender for Endpoint because it was all included in the business premium licensing. To organize this digital transformation, because it was huge, we had a learning curve for our customers, adoption for our learning curve for our employees, adoption for our customers. And to organize the digital transformation, we made a flowchart based on the London Underground map to migrate step by step in a structured way the customer to a modern workplace. So this, although it is in Dutch, this map was used as a project plan for the account managers when we could do step by step migrating a user an on-premises workload or on-premise or in our private cloud to a truly modern workspace for every customer, because every customer is standardized. We can move every customer in a standardized way to the modern workplace in the right order. Because, for example, in the beginning, an account manager went to a customer and said, hey, you can fix this problem with implementing SharePoint. But that customer doesn't even have a tenant. So then he came back, the account manager, to our head office. And I have a new order from implementing SharePoint. And then all the technical guys, but you some tenant and DearSync or AD Connect, all things are missing. So that was to fix the problem. We made this map, and this map fixed for the whole company. It was for the sales, for the internal people, a great roadmap for moving from on-premises to the modern workspace. And nowadays we use this kind of roadmaps for all things like moving servers to Azure. You can think of it, internal processes, etc. We have a map for that. It's really useful. So that's why I want to share it to you. All these new techniques, OneDrive, SharePoint, had a huge impact on our internal business process. We think about so we're using the backend Intune from the Microsoft 365 Business Premium. We also changed the majority of all our MSP tools we are using. Think about inventory for invoicing. So the developer needs to fix all the scripts because of the different licensing, Business Premium instead of SPLA, new migration scripts and tools, instructions for onboarding a customer, completely different, new tools for application and Windows management, new learnings from Microsoft Security Solutions for endpoint and identity. Everything was new for all the people who are working here. New baselines for 365 infrastructure and and we need deployment tooling to onboard and drift detection for all the kind of settings, and keeping up with the pace the Intune people are. Today we had new announcements and how to set up those new things in all your tenants of all your customers. Keeping up is not easy. Education for all technical and non-technical people from what's new in the modern workspace. And last but not least, new imaging workflow, the use of autopilots is also a game-changing thing in our company. And we slightly changed the billing from a price per month, a user instead of a device. And the user, we called it a persona. That was, so that was the implementation of the modern workplace beginning from the year 2000 to 2026. Nowadays, okay, we have every customer migrated to Windows 11 and a modern workspace. So I think we used 3 years to fix that of 80,000 workspaces. But yeah, there's always a next. So now we are here. What's next? So our next opportunity is putting more productivity and more security to the workspace for the customers who are willing to adopt that in a fixed price a month. So of course we have the AI Copilot offering and agents. More security, which is one of my favorites, is adding Defender Suite and baselining. For example, it's a really in the Netherlands a big change. The Entra PT, for example, is the same pricing. AVD Cloud PC to get rid of the private cloud RDS we still have in our data center, and using the tools from Microsoft for our own like internal AI usage, for example, service desk, knowledge bases, get all the information from all the tickets from all the customers and make there your own large language model, which knows everything from our customers and also our solutions for the issues. And in the end, we are trying to make AI ops for the management for Windows updates. We have the auto patch, of course, but there are also server updates. So monitoring, making tickets, automation with all kind of tools, the Graph API, etc. And all kind of automations which can run off hours instead of that we are moving in the evening. So that's in a very short time, 25 years of a journey from on-premises workloads to AI ops.
Thank you, Eric. I could hear the passion in your voice as you talked about the challenges that came with reinventing your business time and time again. But briefly, I'm guessing it has proven to be worth it.
Yes, of course. And there's always a next version.
Excellent. Well, for those of you following along, I really hope that you got some great ideas and inspiration about how you might approach your business from Eric. And now to bring us on home, let me introduce you Microsoft MVP Andrew Taylor, who's going to talk about how to take some of those concepts that Dave introduced and bring them to bear in the real world. So Andrew, take it away.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Dave, for lining me up for these. So yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm an Intune MVP, and I'm here to talk about automating and how that can help you in running your MSP. So let's get started. There we go. That's me. Hello. Okay, first slide. Why should I automate? I'm not going to kill you with slides here, so let's just, I'm going to talk around them. So as an MSP, time is money. If you're not doing something for a customer, you're not charging them money and you're not making anything. Similarly, time spent doing repetitive tasks is something you could be doing on other customers. So for example, spinning up a new tenant, yes, you could do it manually, you could spend a week on it, but that's a week when you could be doing something else. If you automate that and you get it down to 10, 15 minutes per customer, imagine how many more customers you could onboard. You could do more than one at a time if you really wanted. You can go all the way out there and save yourself some money, save your customers money if you really want, or just make yourself more profitable. Another one, repetitive tasks. Say you've got 50 customers. It's not beyond the realms. That's 50 Edge browser tabs. And you're creating the same policy 50 times, one after the other. You get tired, you get bored, you get lazy, and you make mistakes. Which is, mistakes happen. It's part of human life, but your customers probably don't like it. And chances are that you'll get in trouble for it and you'll miss your SLAs and all sorts of things will happen. So again, if you automate something, there is less of a chance of that repetitive mistake happening. It's not impossible, but it's a lot less likely. So what should we look at automating? Start with a big one. Deploying policies. So you onboard a new customer, and like Eric said, you want to standardize everything so your customers are all exactly the same, which is fine. That's a great way of doing business. It's going to make things easier to manage for you. So you've got this new customer, you've got your baseline set of policies. Let's say 50 to 100 policies, about standard for a baseline. You could do that manually. You could go through and you could click the Intune browser and create 100 policies. That's 1,000 clicks, maybe more. I've built hundreds of tenants. I don't think I could build a tenant in less than 4 days by manually clicking. It's just, even knowing exactly what you're configuring, there's too many clicks in there to do it quickly. Why not automate it? You build your set of policies, you export them. Ultimately, Intune policies are all just JSON underneath, with a few exceptions, which we'll cover later. So you grab your policies, you grab the JSON, you create your PowerShell scripts, or however you want to do it, C#, PowerShell, whatever you want, Python, there's many choices. And you deploy your tenant. Rather than having to click through 1,000 times, you click a go button and let it sort itself out. You can go and make yourself a cup of coffee. You can go and relax. You don't even have to tell your customer you're automating if you really don't want to. You could do 3 or 4 at a time and tell them you're busy. That's an easy one. Another thing, updates. So, you've got this beautiful tenant, it's all up and running, and a new policy comes out. Auto patch is a recent one. BitLocker policies change quite regularly. Any sort of new policy you want to deploy, you then have to do that across 50 tenants. You could use the backup restore functionality in your settings catalog, and you could export the JSON into a file and go into each browser and then re-upload it and give it a name and then assign it and all the rest, or you could automate that as well. So these are they're no-brainers, really. Reporting. Your customers need it. Everyone shouts for it. It's not a good use of your time. Let's be honest. I can see why customers need it. They want to see what's happening in a tenant. They want to check what they're getting their money's worth out of you. But it's time consuming. So why not automate that as well? Stick it in Azure Runbook and just schedule it and say, right, once a week, send this report to this customer, please. And then you just sit back and wait for them to hopefully not complain about the reports they're getting through. Monitoring and alerting. This is more for you than the customer. Non-compliant devices. You've got your conditional access policy in there that says non-compliant devices can't get in through our conditional access, so they can't get to 365 apps or anything like that, which is great. It's exactly how you should have it. Your conditional access should be blocking anything that's not supported. But do you want to find out when the users ring you and say, I can't get in because my device is non-compliant? Or would it be better if you get an alert? So again, automate it. Set up a script. First thing in the morning, you get a message through saying, these are your non-compliant devices. You can ring the users up. You can get the device compliant. And they find out before they even get blocked. So you look fabulous. The users love you, even though technically you're still fixing a fault. It's just a different way of approaching things. And if you've got the users on board, everyone's much happier. Realistically, anything that can be done in the UI can be automated. There is no reason why not. As Dave said, it's all graph underneath. So, if you're clicking buttons, if my view is I have to do something more than twice, I will automate it. Sometimes that's not the best of ideas, and I'll automate something and spend 8 hours doing it and only ever do it twice. But that's all part of the learning experience. And it's a great way to know what Intune's doing underneath. But there are some things I would probably suggest avoiding. It's not that these can't be done, except the middle one, but it's not a good use of your time. So Win32 apps. Yes, you can automate it. But to give you an idea, when you click through in the UI, you create your Intune app, and then you'll notice at the end, it goes into like a read-only mode while it uploads the application package itself. It's exactly the same in Graph. So you have to go through, you have to create your application details. You've got to create your detection logic. You've got to create your remediation. If you've got a script on there, anything like that, you create all that. Then you create your application stub, which is an Intune policy. That's the easy bit. Easy. I mean, you've still got to work out your detection. But then you have to upload the Win32 app into blob storage. Keeping in mind, you've got to create the Win32 app, which if you're automating is another step altogether. And then you've got to wait for it to hit blob storage, at which point you send a commit message to the app policy itself. So I have scripts on GitHub which can do it. You're welcome to use them, but I would suggest if you're just starting out, avoid Win32 apps because they are quite complicated and there is a lot of room for error there, and nothing's going to make a user complain more than their app's not working. Autopatch is behind a locked API, so if you're planning on doing anything apart from onboarding into Autopatch, don't at this point because you won't be able to get to it. The API is locked, you can't do anything with it. And manually creating settings catalog policies. Yes, again, it can be done, but if you sit there in the F12 network tools, like Dave recommended, you will see just how complicated the settings catalog policy is because it's across all the platforms. So you have to set the platform. Imagine you're in the UI, you pick your platform, and then you pick your top level policy, then you drill down to the policy inside the top level, and then you set the setting in the policy. It's exactly the same in Graph, so it gets quite complicated. My suggestion would be to create the policies manually in a tenant somewhere, F12, grab the policy content, or export it if it's a setting catalog, and use the JSON that you've created in the UI, rather than trying to create everything in code, because that won't be a good experience for you. How can I get started? I'm copying a lot of Dave's stuff here, but there we go. F12 network tools. I live inside the F12 network tools. I would suggest if you're in there, stick a filter on the word graph, because otherwise there'll be a lot of chaos from the Intune UI elements that you don't need to worry about. The other thing is if you click on something which isn't supported, you'll know because there'll be no network traffic on the graph endpoint. So start there. It gives you the best overview. There is one thing to watch, batching. I haven't got a slide on batching, but to give you an idea, some things get throttled in Graph. If there's too many connections, it throttles you. So what you can do is you can send a batch request where it sends it to one endpoint with multiple requests within the same JSON. So watch for that in the F12 network tools. If one pops up as batch, you want to dig through into the request and the response to see exactly what's happening within that, because it could be 2, 3, 4 different queries at the same time. We have Graph X-Ray, which is a plugin for Edge, Firefox, and I think maybe Safari, but I haven't checked. It works the same way as an F12 network tools, but it does the hard work for you, and it can show you the commandlets if you want to go down that route. Rather than doing the raw JSON, you could use a commandlet. And as Dave said, the Graph PowerShell module, it's the one I prefer to use. Personally, I just like to put on the authentication module and then call everything as raw HTTP calls, but you have got the option of commandlets in there. On the subject of that, modules or not modules. So on the left is the one I use, Microsoft.graph.authentication. This just basically does the connect mggraph and then invoke mggraph request. You can see there are no dependencies on it. It is one module that you have to install. It gets updated regularly enough, but because it just does authentication, there's not that many changes to it. On the right, we have the Microsoft Graph module, which has all of the different commandlets inside it. And you can see I've had to zoom out there just to fit them all on the screen, and there were more underneath that. So just keep in mind, if you do go down the commandlet route, you will have to put on multiple modules to do what you need to do. So, one for users, one for devices, one for conditional access. They'll all have to go on there. They'll all get updated. You'll have to keep an eye on updates. They'll all get changed. So again, you might need to changes. When they went from Graph v1 to v2, the endpoints changed. It stuck beta on the end instead of not having that. So these are things to keep in mind. If you go down the HTTP route, there are less changes to worry about. Yes, the code is more complex, but I feel you get a better idea of exactly what it's doing as well. So you've got this perfectly beautiful script. It's running locally. You can run it when a new customer onboards, but you want to take things further. What if you don't want to have to run it on your device? What if you want other people to run it on their devices? You don't want to be sharing PowerShell scripts. Use Azure runbooks. These run directly in the cloud, so they're a lot quicker because you're running directly on Microsoft Backbone. So you send the thing to Graph and it runs in maybe a tenth of the time. Even on a top speed internet, they are so much quicker. It uses an app branch with always do application permissions. Delegate permissions won't work because it needs to be run as the logged in user. So you create an application registration in Entra. You put the permissions you need on at the application level, and then you point that at your runbook. I have a blog post on getting started with this you might want to look at. But just to give you an idea, you also need to put any modules on. So if you do go down the commandlet route, you'll have to put every module onto your runbook. You then trigger your runbook, you put your PowerShell script in, and you can set it to run on a webhook. So you can send data to it. If you want to specify a tenant ID in your OneDrive, for example, you could put that as a webhook and you could trigger it that way, or you can just schedule it. So it's your reporting one, you drop a schedule on that and have it run once a morning just to send the email out. So that's an easy way of taking it a step further. If you're looking at doing Intune Win apps here, keep in mind that Azure runbooks run on Windows Core. So the Win32 app util will not work on there. You'll have to find an alternative. There are others out there. I can't remember top of the head which ones they are, but there are others that we'll use in that example. This is one I hit an awful lot. Why am I not seeing all of my results? So you've tested this script in your test lab, which I'm sure you all have because you're all well behaved. And it's returning, all the users or all the devices or something like that. You throw it into production on a customer tenant and you're not getting everything back. And you sit there looking at it, think, well, I'm sure they've got more than 20, 50 devices. And that is because of pagination. So if you run something in the Intune portal, you've got that load more button. So devices, for example, users, there's a load more, which brings up the next 50 results. Graph works in exactly the same way. When you send a request, there is a load more link that appears in the output. You can click on that and it brings up the next batch of devices or users. That's great if you're doing it manually, but if you're running this in Azure Function or Azure Runbook, you only get the first set of results because you can't click through the links because you're not doing it. There's no one there. So for that, you have to loop through. So the script you can see on screen, don't worry about copying down, scan that QR code. It'll take you directly to the script. What that will do is rather than doing invoke mg graph request to URL, you call this function I've written, which loops through. It looks for the own data next link, which is the next number of devices link, and it loops through each one, creating a PowerShell object, which includes all of your data. So that will work for any paginated data. The one thing to watch is it's looking for the value within the response. So when you run a graph request, the vast majority, the data is within a dot value because it's paginated. but there are some which aren't. Off the top of my head, I think autopilot profiles might be one. This function will not work for those because there is nothing in the value. At some point, I'm going to rewrite it so it does, but it's just something to keep in mind. Object IDs. You would think it'd be straightforward, but sadly, it's not. So if we look at the screenshots here, the top one, as you can see, comes from the Intune portal. So we have an Intune device ID and an Entra device ID and a serial number. If you go into the autopilot portal and do a graph query there is a third ID, which is the autopilot ID. That's only for normal autopilot, not device prep. The one at the bottom is the Entra screenshot. So we have a device ID and an object ID. Now, if you look, the device IDs match between the two, but the Intune device ID and the Entra object ID are specific to those platforms. So the Intune device ID cannot be found in Entra, and similarly, the Entra object ID can't be found in Intune. So when you're doing your lookups between your various IDs, it's worth keeping in mind that the platform you start in might have an influence on the data you get back. So in this case, I would suggest starting an Intune portal and then go through to the Entra portal because you can query the ID that way. If you go into Defender, there is another ID again. The only advantage of Defender is that you can query on device name as well. So as long as your devices have fixed names and you don't have overlapping devices, which you tend to do, you can go that way. Otherwise, again, there's another ID to keep in mind. And with 4 minutes left, how would I like to learn more? I have a blog, which I think is going to pop up at some point, which has getting started guides on many, many things. And I've also just released the second edition of my Intune cookbook, which is a full getting started guide, both building a tenant and automating it every step of the way. So if you want to get started with a graph, I have scripts in there for pretty much everything within the Intune portal. There I am. Lovely. That's my GitHub repo with a lot of stuff in it.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. For those of you who really feasted on that, we're going to make all of these slides available so that you'll have a chance to re-engage. Of course, this is a recorded presentation, so you can go back and catch up on some of the things that you missed. And I wanted to take this opportunity, since we're all here, to maybe go over some of the questions that we've got. This first question is going to be for Andrew, which we hear a lot, which is, are there endpoints that cannot be accessed by API?
Yes. So as I mentioned, Autopatch is locked down. Organizational messages, now they have moved from the Intune portal into the admin portal. You can't get to those. And the Intune version number in tenant administration. That one I haven't been able to find yet, unless Dave has some sort of magic way of finding that one. That's also one which is hidden.
No, I don't. But let me also add to that there are some of the APIs that do some summarization and reporting in endpoint analytics. And those are only callable by the Intune console. And then if you've had the opportunity to take a look and try out some of Explorer is currently an application that is also limited to the Intune console. We hear that there are lots of you that would like API access, so that's under consideration, but currently that's only accessible by the Intune console.
All right, Dave, another one for you. You mentioned config as code.
Yeah.
What's the best strategy for pipeline management there? What tools should people be looking at to manage that most effectively?
So interestingly enough, also what Andrew had talked about was effectively building your own, I'll say, pipeline, which is tools that are used to stitch together automations, maybe use things like webhooks. So there are some customers that I've worked with who are building their own native bespoke, using their own tooling. Now, usually that's a customer or a partner that's got a strong development team, but there are two, I'll say, primary mechanisms that I see out there that customers are using. One of them is GitHub Actions, and the other is Azure DevOps. And both of those have the ability to replicate the type of automation that you want for doing config as code. So like some of the suggestions that you've heard today where you want to export out settings that were created from the settings catalog and you want to deploy them across multiple tenants. That's not necessarily a traditional config as code, but it's an automation that can be done using GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. So honestly, my recommendation is use what you know between those two tools, or if you have a strong development team and you're able to build that automation, use what's most comfortable for you. You know, obviously through the use of AI tools, there are lots of ways of creating the code that's necessary for doing that orchestration, but the back end, I like either GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps for that.
Great. Erik, quick question for you from your experience running an MSP. What was the biggest game changer for you, right? Where did you see a real difference in your operations? Was it when you were able to standardize on the sort of modern workplace with Intune? Was it introducing automation? I want some of the MSPs out there that are sort of testing the water or thinking about it. What was the one thing that you did that showed you that you were on the right path? Maybe that first step.
The basic is standardization, because it's everything the same. It's easier to do automation. So if everything is different, it's hard to make all kind of. So then we can deliver an automated workspace. I showed you a picture of tons of servers in a rack. It was deploying a server took us 6 weeks. With virtualization, it took us 6 minutes. So that was the right path. And then we delivered on a monthly basis the recurring. So I could pay all my personnel from the recurring business. So it was I had since that time my sleep is getting better. So and because everything said, it doesn't matter which kind of customer was onboarded, because it was just the same. 10 customers with 10 workspaces is 100 workspaces for me, or one customer with 100. It doesn't matter, because so we are small customer, big customer. It doesn't matter, because if it fits to the model. So recurring and virtualization, those together was a good choice.
That echoes a theme that we hear a lot, which is as MSPs, there are a lot of different ways to do things. Tell me which one I should do. And that brings us to another question from a viewer who's asking about if you're doing multiple tenant automation across multiple tenants of repeatable tasks, what's the safest way to run scheduled jobs, and what tool? PowerShell, Azure Automation, Logic Apps. What's the tool and sort of parameter recommendation that you would have, Andrew, for repeatable tasks across multiple tenants? And then Dave will keep you honest.
Yeah. I'm a big PowerShell fan, so I would probably use PowerShell unless you have in-house development team who can do C# or something. Stick with PowerShell, because there'll be a lot more scripts online and a lot more assistance available. Best way of doing it, if it's scheduled, I wouldn't run it locally, because then you need to have a scheduled task on your machine, and nobody wants to leave their machines on 24 hours a day. Automation or Logic Apps, both will work. I have a slight preference towards automation, just because I think it's slightly easier to use, and you've got the webhooks on the top. So certainly with multiple tenants, you could put some parameters within the webhook for tenant ID, for example, for whichever tenant you're trying to hit. Any sort of customizations you need in there, that gives you the flexibility. So you can just send a request to a webhook, or you can schedule it with the parameters in there, and it just gives you that flexibility when you're talking about multiple tenants.
Cool. All right. Last question. This one is nominally for Erik, because we're sort of posing you as the real world implementation guy, but anybody could take this. So how do you make sure your automation doesn't accidentally break something? Or if it does break, what's your testing and rollback strategy? How do you build these systems so that they're not going to make a lot of upset clients?
We do, of course, in a release management. So we have out there like the ring thing. We have customers. We are in the first ring, and of course we test it on ourselves. Not on the service desk, but we test it on ourselves. And then by release management, and then you have a rollback, of course. And what we to the previous question, we also have many automations across all our tenants, of course. And in the beginning, also we used PowerShell, but one of the problems we face is that PowerShell is not that fast on scale. And then you get this kind of scripts, and then nobody understands them when they leave the company, or you get some people moving in and moving out. So we are now moving to flow-based, like a Nathan or a Roost or whatever tool, or maybe a Logic app, multi-tenant tools. And then you have a clear overview of the flow, and we always use directly the Graph API. But to the test case, we have test tenants, we have test laptops, we have just in Dutch we call it OTAP. It's just the testing, the acceptance, and the production ourselves. Customers with the ring, and then the rest of the customers. That's the way we do this.
Just like in Windows Auto Patch, ring-based progressive deployment.
For all that kind of things, for the applications, for the Windows updates, etc., and for our own tooling.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Dave Randall, Andrew Taylor, Erik Loef. We're going to have our resource page, aka.ms/Intune for MSPs. That's our resource where you can learn all about our new announcements, the expansion of the ecosystem, resources for marketing, for technical skilling, all the things that an MSP might need. And if there's something that you need that you're not getting, well, I'm going to show that resource link in a bit. But first, coming up, if you're traveling to a conference, you can find the Intune team. We're giving some keynotes and presentations in Paris at the Modern Endpoint Management Summit in April in Paris. I hear that's a nice time to be there. And then our next month's call. Thank you, Dave, Erik, and Andrew for being here. Next month, we're going to have, perhaps among other guests, MVP Jori van den Bosch. We're going to talk about device configuration and policies. That's April 21st. That's the third Tuesday. That's 8 a.m. Pacific time. We really hope that you had fun here, and we'll come back next month. And of course, if you want something different, you want to go in a different direction, scan this QR code or take the survey at aka.ms Intune MSP survey. Tell us a little bit about what you want to hear from MVPs, peers, experts, people who know your business much better than I do. And with that, I want to say thank you all for your participation, and thank you all for joining us around the world, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.